Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really big question, one that sparks debate pretty much everywhere. In 2025, arranged marriage versus love marriage, which one actually works better?
It's a huge topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Touches on personal choice, culture, family.
Exactly. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to unpack all of that. We want to cut through some of the noise, look at it emotionally, culturally, even scientifically.
Yeah, we've got some great source material data, different perspectives to really get to the core of it.
Our goal is simple, to help you, our listener, become genuinely well-informed on something that's, well, pretty fascinating and affects a lot of lives.
So let's get into it.
Okay, first up, arranged marriage in 2025. I think the first thing we have to do is, push past some old ideas.
Right. The big one being that they're all forced. That's just not the reality for many today.
Not at all. It's really evolved, hasn't it? Especially in places like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, parts of the Middle East.
Absolutely. Our sources talk a lot about the semi-arranged model now,
Yeah.
which is, quite different. It's more about parents making introductions.
Introductions, okay, not decisions.
Exactly. The individuals meet, they talk, they decide for themselves if they want to move forward. It's their choice, independently made.
And interestingly, this isn't just happening in, say, South Asia. Our sources point to a sort of, well, intentional dating with family input cropping up even in Western cultures.
It's a fascinating blend, yeah.
Yeah.
Tradition meeting modern autonomy.
Yeah.
And technology plays a huge role now, too.
How so?
Well, you've got modern matchmakers using, deep psychological profiles. There are sophisticated online platforms, even AI, helping craft bios to find compatible people.
Wow. So it's definitely not the blind setup people might
But
picture.
not at all. The sources put it nicely. Arranged marriage today looks more like a personalized recommendation than a blind setup.
Huh. A personalized recommendation. That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
Okay.
Okay, so let's flip to the other side. Love marriage in 2025.
Right. The core idea here is, self-chosen relationships.
Based on what? Chemistry, shared interests.
Often, yeah. Chemistry, shared values, that immediate emotional connection. It starts with the individuals choosing each other first.
And the ways people meet are pretty familiar, I suppose. School, work.
Schoolwork, friends, and of course dating apps, which, bring their own complexities, the paradox of choice, maybe making it harder for some.
That's a whole other deep dive, maybe. But culturally, love marriage is the norm in the West, right?
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more accepted, even preferred sometimes in many Eastern cultures, too. Though navigating family expectations can still be, let's say, a unique challenge there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It brings up a really sharp contrast, one of our sources highlighted. In love marriage, you choose first and explain later.
Okay.
In arranged marriage, you explain first and choose after.
Ah. Choose first, explain later versus explain first, choose after. That distinction about the initial dynamic, that feels pretty significant.
It really can shape how the whole relationship unfolds from the start.
Okay, so we've got the definitions kind of mapped out now. What does the research actually say? What about outcomes, the numbers?
Right, let's look at the data. There was a pretty comprehensive Harvard study in 2024, looked at longitudinal data across different continents.
And what did they find?
Well, globally, they found arranged marriages tend to have a slightly lower divorce rate.
Slightly lower.
Yeah, particularly noticeable in South Asia. The figures were something like 6–8% divorce rate for arranged marriages compared to maybe 10–12% for love marriages in those areas.
Wow. 6–8% versus 10–12%. That does suggest something about stability, doesn't it?
It does suggest the initial framework might influence long-term stability, yeah, but it's not the whole story.
Okay, so what's the nuance? Is it just about staying together or about being happy together?
Exactly. That's the crucial distinction the study made. While arranged marriages showed, lower divorce rates, higher endurance, let's say,
Right.
Relationship satisfaction tended to be reported higher in love marriages. But, and this is a big but, if there's sufficient emotional maturity between the couple.
Ah, okay. Emotional maturity is key for satisfaction in love marriages.
Seems to be. So, the study differentiated.
Mm-hmm.
Love marriages often have higher initial happiness. Arranged marriages, on the other hand, seem to report higher long-term emotional endurance and perhaps a different kind of contentment that builds over time.
So interesting. Higher initial happiness versus maybe higher long-term endurance. It really drives home that point from the source. It's not about how you meet, it's how you grow.
Precisely. How
Yeah.
you grow together seems much more important than how you started.
Right, that makes sense. Let's break down the pros and cons a bit more directly then. Starting with arranged marriage, what are the big advantages?
Well, probably the most cited one is family support. Having that built-in network from both sides can be, a huge help practically and emotionally.
Right, like built-in babysitters, maybe. And often similar backgrounds, too.
Yeah, often. Similar cultural, maybe socioeconomic backgrounds. That can definitely smooth out the early days, reduce friction because there's a shared understanding.
And expectations are clearer.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Expectations are often discussed and managed upfront, involving both families.
Okay. But what about the challenges, the cons?
Well, there can definitely be pressure. Pressure to adjust very quickly, especially if you haven't known the person for long before marrying.
Yeah, adapting to a whole new person, a whole new family, fast.
And if that initial chemistry, that spark, isn't there right away, it needs conscious effort to build it. It might not just happen organically.
And maybe less time for trust to build beforehand.
Potentially, yeah. Because things can move fast after the introduction. That deep emotional intimacy and trust might need more intentional cultivation after the wedding rather than before.
Right. Okay, now let's look at love marriages. The pros seem pretty obvious, maybe. That natural connection.
Exactly. That natural compatibility based on personal choice and connection built over time. That's usually seen as the big plus.
And you get the emotional bond before the legal one.
Right. Which can create a really strong foundation, shared history, shared understanding. Plus, lots of chances to figure out who you are, the couple, what your shared goals are, kind of organically.
But it's not always smooth sailing either. What are the typical cons for love marriages?
Well, a big one could be the potential lack of family support. If the families don't approve of the choice, or if there are big cultural clashes.
Yeah, that can cause a lot of stress.
Absolutely. And sometimes,
Hmm.
sometimes, that initial intense emotion, the passion, can kind of overshadow practical thinking.
You mean like rushing into things?
Sort of.
Mhm.
Or maybe overlooking potential long-term incompatibilities because the initial connection feels so strong. Those might only surface later on.
Okay, so pros and cons on both sides, but it sounds like the sources keep coming back to something more fundamental.
We really do. Across the board, the message was clear. It's not the method, it's the mindset.
Not the method, the mindset. That feels like the core insight here.
Hmm.
So, what does make any marriage work in 2025, whether it started arranged or from love?
The sources all pointed to a set of, universal factors. Things like emotional maturity, we mentioned that earlier.
Right.
A genuinely shared vision for the future. Not just hoping you want the same things, but actually talking about it and aligning.
Communication.
Huge. But not just talking really strong, empathetic communication and, crucially, good conflict resolution skills. Knowing how to disagree constructively.
That's hard for anyone.
It is.
Hmm.
And also a deep respect for both independence and interdependence. You need space to be individuals, but also strength as a unit.
Independence and interdependence, that balance.
Exactly. These are the things that matter way more than how you met.
And there's a powerful quote summing it up.
Yeah. The happiest couples, regardless of how they met, prioritize understanding over ego, peace over pride, and connection over control.
Understanding over ego, peace over pride, connection over control. That really says it all, doesn't it? It transcends the whole arranged versus love debate.
Completely. It gets to the heart of what makes any human relationship thrive.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground, but the main takeaway seems pretty clear, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The how you met your partner, whether it was family, fate, an app, it's really less critical than what you decide to build together afterwards.
Absolutely. It's about the conscious effort, the mindset you both bring.
Right. Those common threads,
Yeah.
emotional maturity, shared vision, communication, handling conflict well, that respect for each other.
Mm.
Those seem to be the real ingredients for success.
Could agree more. It's the work you put in day after day.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. We've talked about these core elements: understanding over ego, peace over pride, connection over control, making marriages work. Well, how might applying those same principles transform other important relationships in your life? Think about family, close friends, maybe even key colleagues at work. Could focusing on those things make those connections stronger too? Something to think about.